I would like to welcome everybody at our joint event of the Netherlands Chamber of Commerce and the Czech Green Building Council. The title of today's webinar is Wearthy Appraisal. It may be intriguing and it may not even be the correct English. However, in simple terms, today we will talk about the use of recycled materials in the building sector and about buildings as material bank. The natural sources are becoming more and more scarce, as we all know, and the solution could be turning the demolition waste into construction material. However, at the same time, we need to remove the barriers for wider use and to implement appropriate legislation that would motivate the construction companies and developers to use the recycled material. I will now ask Bastian Brown, the director of the Netherlands Chamber of Commerce, or Traders by Nature, as they call themselves quite nicely, to introduce our panelists and their presentation in more detail. And he will take you through today's webinar. I hope that you will find this event inspiring and that you will learn new things. And I wish you a good time. And over to you, Bastian.
Thank you, Simona. And thank you all for joining us today on this event, City as a Source, Wearthy Appraisal. A special welcome to our speakers of today, Peter Nijkens of New Horizon, welcome. Ronald van der Waals we have with us today of CBRE Global Investors. And we have Cyril Klepek of CYRKL joining us today for this event. A couple of practicalities before we start. Your microphones have been muted to avoid the background interference, so just that you're aware of it. If I could kindly ask you to switch on your cameras, it's always nice for our presenters to be able to see their audience, and it's also nice then we have the feeling a bit that we're in this event together. Now we are more stuck at home and online again. If you have any questions during the presentations, please place them in the chat. You can do this either publicly or privately to me, and I will pick them up at the appropriate moment. But if you prefer to ask your question orally towards the end or in between, that's also fine. We plan this event till about 5, but it all depends on how many questions you have, the interaction, etc. And I hope there will be a lot of it. Because we have these 3 distinguished gentlemen with us now presenting their ideas and their inventions, and this is your chance to ask them anything you would like. First, a short introduction from my side. I first came across the concept of Wearthy Appraisal in the beginning of this year already, and it actually caught my eye because of its creativity, thinking outside of the box. To make systemic changes that will contribute to the transformation from a linear economic model to a circular one. And this is one of the topics that we as the NCCC Traders by Nature really carry out a lot. We would like to help the Czech society to make this transformation. It's a different way of looking at obsolete buildings. So just not as obsolete or as buildings, but in what other way these could have value. And by finding different cooperation partners, making these things happen. So it's focused on finding solutions and not focusing on problems that have existed for decades. Also, and I have to admit, I only learned this recently, to be honest. Some of you might know that we are organizing the Creative Heroes Award event in March next year, which is actually an existing event from the Netherlands. And this award event is focusing on the positive, sustainable impact of creative thinking. And New Horizon, today with us, in the person of Peter Nijkens, they were one of the winners in 2017 of the Creative Heroes Award. So that's a nice coincidence, actually. So today we will kick off with Peter Nijkens of New Horizon, who will tell us more about Wearthy Appraisal and how it works. Next, we will have Ronald van der Waals, who will highlight the pilots that have been done in the Netherlands, but also speak about how existing buildings and their materials can be an alternative source of income. And finally, we'll have Cyril Klepek. Cyril is the founder of CYRKL, a waste-to-resource online platform where supply and demand is being matched, and a distribution platform for used resources and building materials. So with that, I would like to give the word to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bastiaan. I will share my screen. Well, first of all, thanks for giving us the opportunity to share our ambition with this audience, Bastiaan. We see the city as a source. Maybe you can go to the next slide. If we look to buildings, then we recognize a very valuable building with a certain function, of course, for a certain while, but especially it's for a certain while. So the assembly is probably for a certain while, but the materials are probably there forever. So we look with a different view to that same building and recognize a lot of materials with maybe an endless life instead of an endless life which is ending at the building. Maybe you can go to the next slide, please. So New Horizon is founded in 2015, and one of the main values is that we are a circular company, a native circular company. So we don't have a traditional linear supply chain or income. So we started from scratch, and our founder recognized that a lot of new materials are entering the urban environment for new buildings, and that the old materials who are getting out of the urban environment are treated as waste, and those two supply chains doesn't connect at all. There are two complete different worlds with the companies involved who are making their money, but the real physical materials are not in relation with each other. So that's the real nature of our company, is this, let's say, surprise, or how do you say that these kind of materials are not touching each other, and we recognize a lot of loss of value. So we started in 2015, and the company New Horizon is focusing on three main areas. First of all, we really harvesting materials. So we are, I think in the Netherlands, we are now number 4 in volume about demolishing or harvesting buildings, and with that volume we are getting owner of a lot of materials, and that's what we want, because we think that the materials are the drivers to define these kind of new circular routes. So we really physically harvesting these materials all over the country, mainly in the areas of Amsterdam and Rotterdam, of course, high density of buildings. The second area we are focusing is on upcycling those materials. We don't have factories owned by ourselves, but we are cooperating with traditional companies who are focusing on certain typical materials like concrete and bricks and electrical wiring, mechanical equipment, and we are cooperating with those companies to upcycle the materials. And we have a third focus area, which is focusing on data services and innovation. Of course, data is very important. We want to predict better and sooner when materials will be getting available. And we are collecting data also about current values of materials, of course. This is related to the Wearthy Appraisal. And with innovations, we are trying to change processes, but also technical solutions. So one of our main innovations at this moment, which is in an upscaling phase now, we can extract the secondary raw materials from concrete, gravel, sand, and cement, and make new concrete of it. And that's a technical innovation. But as I think to making the circular economy profitable, I think 70% of is related to the challenge of changes processes, and just 25, I think, is related to the challenges about technical solutions. So we're more focusing about processes and awareness, because that's the base about that are the main drivers to create a circular economy. Next slide, please. These are our urban mining collective partners. So we have quite a few well-known international manufacturers of building materials, but we have also distributors and also some partners which are more related to the knowledge. If you talk about technical solutions or maybe even legal support, quite often the ownership of these kind of materials is also a legal puzzle. Everything is different from the standard linear economy. So we have a company and a partner who's supporting us on that level as well. The main reason why we'll try to connect with these, let's say, more linear orientated companies is that our materials are always too much or too less. So the match between what's getting available from our harvested material and what is needed for a new building will never match exactly. So we want to make a connection with the traditional linear economy and try to supply materials in a hybrid form. So if we have just 20,000 bricks, but a new building needs 30,000, that is 20,000 out of circular materials completed with 10,000 linear. This is just to make it happen, because otherwise we will have still a lot of materials and not able to sell it. So we need to find the right way to marriage, let's say that way, to marriage our materials with virgin and new materials to fit with the demand of the new build and get things done. Otherwise we will have a big pile of materials and it will always too less or too much. Next slide, please. Yes, please, next. We are focusing on the physical materials, but we recognized during the first few years that we were getting involved too late, which means that if it was already decided that the building had approached the end of life and the owner already decided that the building need to be, few slide backs, please. Yes, this is fine. This is fine, Bastiaan. Thank you. So we noticed that we were getting involved in the process too late. We were, let's say, in a traditional world, the company who's really demolishing the building is called at the moment when the decision is already made, and he has to get rid of the building as soon as possible for the lowest price. Because we treat the building as valuable materials, we need to be involved much sooner. And that's why we created a few tools, and one of the tools is the Wearthy Appraisal. With the Wearthy Appraisal has a few objectives. The first objective is to create awareness at the building owner, because this building owner, like Ronald, he will join our meeting and complete his story in a while. But the building owner owns a very valuable building, and as long as the building has a certain value on the market and is a nice way of getting the income, then the building should remain, of course. Keeping the building in a good shape is always better than get rid of it. But at a certain moment, maybe the building will decline in value because it doesn't match with the market demand anymore, or it doesn't match or meet the technical standards or demands. So the value of the building can be declined or can be reduced in a while. But the value of the involved materials is quite stable and will probably even increase in the future, because virgin materials, if they're really getting an additional cost related to their environmental impact, the CO2 equivalent, then probably a lot of virgin materials will get more expensive, and which means that the secondary materials harvested from these buildings are getting a higher value. So we just want to make sure that building owners owns a very nice, valuable building, but are also owner of valuable materials. And that's what we want to achieve with Wearthy Appraisal. If we getting this picture clear and we identify the materials and recognize the value, then for us it's a potential donor building. So we make a kind of a donor deals that we say, well, this building, which will probably be meeting the end of life somewhere within the coming 3 to 5 years, we call it a donor building. And then we already identified the materials far in advance, which can be reused. And that's our value from New Horizon, because if we get a clear picture in the future about what kind of materials are getting available when, then we can create, we can invest in techniques to upcycle the material. So this volume, this, let's say, forecast of volume is needed to change the process and to invest in factories or equipment to upcycle these materials. So for us, it's very important to understand soon when, where, and what kind of materials are getting available. And with this Wearthy Appraisal, we're getting this picture in advance. Next slide, please. The scope of the Wearthy Appraisal is related to the well-known 6 layers of brand. So with our appraisal, we're focusing on four layers. We don't take care about the location itself. It's more on the investor. Also the interior, like furniture, etc. It's quite a quick circular loop. So we're more looking to the building, the insulation, the skin, and of course the construction. And depending on the really demand, or you want to get rid of the complete building or have a transition, so you probably will remain the construction and maybe the skin, then we still can recognize the value of the insulation, of course. So these 4 layers are our focus area and segmentation of our value. Next slide, please. And with the value, we make a report, and this is one of the examples of CBRE Global Investors. So we did a big inspection about this building. We recognized the value of a lot of materials in terms of raw materials, or maybe even as a component, and we identify the actual value. The value is related on the fact that for a lot of materials like concrete, ceramics, wood, gypsum, steel, of course, we have with our partners, we have business cases where we can upcycle these materials. So for instance, we know that in the traditional industry, if you want to get rid of your concrete, then the value is probably in the Netherlands about 2 to 3 euros per ton, because it will be cracked in small pieces, it will be mixed with other materials, and it will be a foundation and paving for roads. But we are able to extract the concrete and to make circular gravel, sand, and cement of it. So our value is about 5 to 6 euros a ton. And if we make an offer for instance, to CBRE to dismantle this building, then it will not only be a sum of a lot of costs about hiring equipment and people, getting everything dismantled, etc., but it will also a plus on that quotation. So because we recognize that we buy these valuable materials from Ronald, so there will be a little plus as well, and this plus will increase in the future. We expect that we are developing now business cases and supply chains with having these materials as a raw material, which makes valuable businesses. And we expect that in the future, this number, for instance, for this building, it's over 242 euros. This will increase in the coming years because these materials will increase in value, because the virgin materials were getting more expensive. So we always try to be, as soon as possible, being, let's say, a process changer or leader. And our slogan is if we are led by passion, then you will be on time. But if you led by urgency, then you will be too late. So with these kind of process developments, we just want to make sure to be on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Very, very interesting. And with that, I would like to give the word to Ronald van der Waals of CBRE Global Investors. Over to you, Ronald.
Yes, thank you, Bastiaan, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen and assume you can all see my screen as of now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for having me today. Quick introduction, Ronald van der Waals. I'm a managing director within Global Investors, CBRE Global Investors, fund manager of the CBRE Dutch Office Fund. and also executive board member of our Dutch organization. Short introduction on CBRE Global Investors. We are a real assets management firm acting on behalf of 4 institutional clients, so insurance company, pension funds, commonwealth funds, and we do that actually across the world. So we try to match capital around the world with local investment opportunities through our local presence, and also do that substantially within Europe. We have local offices in Amsterdam, but also in Prague, and hopefully some of you have ever heard of us, or at least of the brand CBRE, because we already have been for quite some time active in the Czech Republic and our office in Prague already since the days that we still belong to ING. Our firm is part of CBRE Group, which is the largest real estate focused service provider, real estate service provider in the world, and listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and is also quite active in the Czech Republic. Zooming a little bit in on my day-to-day responsibilities, because that will also be the link to Wearthy Appraisal and what I would like to talk about today. I'm heading the CBRE Dutch Office Fund, which is a specialist investment fund for Dutch offices only. We focus on the G4, which are the 4 biggest cities in the Netherlands, and specifically on Amsterdam, as you can see. We tend to invest in multi-tenant prime office properties and have more than 500 tenants in 11 properties only. So we tend to have a lot of tenants in a number of buildings. We mainly have a core investment strategy, but also the possibility to do our own developments for our own account. And currently developing an extension of the World Trade Center in Amsterdam. Then making the link to, I would say, ESG and responsible investing, where I think Wearthy Appraisal is really directly linked to. So it is an integral part of our strategy, which is it already actually for a long time. And it's not only because we want to do good, but also because we truly believe that sustainable properties in the broader sense will outperform in the medium to long run compared to the benchmark. So we made a very deliberate choice to be really at the forefront of ESG, and also therefore pursue a target and impact-led strategy. And part of that strategy is also to participate in all kinds of new initiatives. First of all, see if we can be of help or support, because we have a large portfolio, also to learn, and then also to share. And I think today is mostly also about sharing what our view is and what we think that we have figured out, and hopefully we could also inspire other people with that. Our main objective is to be carbon neutral in 2035, which feels like a long way out, but it's actually in 15 years. So it's not that long at all if you consider, let's say, the normal cycle of a building. We have 5 focus areas to achieve the target. And actually I want to talk today about the target reduce natural resource consumption, which is of course a link to Wearthy Appraisal. And what I actually want to do, I want to take you to 2 examples, because the title of my presentation is Building Materials, or it's actually Building Materials as an Alternative Income Stream. And I want to highlight how we see that. My first example is actually the same building as Peter actually highlighted in his presentation as well, but then I would say a nicer picture, and a little bit from a better distance, everything looks better in reality, or than reality. But I think it's good to mention that this building, although it seems like that it's a little bit in the middle of nowhere, this is on top of the central station in Utrecht, which is the biggest train station in the Netherlands, with more than 50 million visitors each year. So this is one of the big hubs in the Netherlands, and also naturally a good place to invest in offices. And we actually developed the World Trade Center of Utrecht actually next to this building, which is actually just outside of the picture. But it is a very important strategic location for us, and that is also the reason why we still hold on to this asset. But as you can see, the property won't last for that long anymore. So we are actually currently developing plans on what to do. And one of the options actually is to demolish the building and to build a new property. So how would we do that in the current situation? That is probably that we just would knock the building down and make a new development plan and probably assign a general contractor who would outsource the demolition to a third party. And it normally costs us money. So the amount you should take into consideration is roughly 125 euros per gross floor area. For this building, this would be roughly 1.2 million of demolition cost. And that is approximately 4.3% of the development budget, of the overall development budget. So for us, demolishing always has been a cost item. And apart from, let's say, the fact that we think or that we find that in any building where you spend capex on, you should look if you can reuse materials, upcycling or recycling. There's also a very practical approach that we have taken, and that's why we also interested to further pursue the Wearthy Appraisal and also the more circular approach. And that is on the middle part of the slide. That is actually, if we would look differently, so take into account the amount Peter mentioned of 143,000 euros, which he actually is willing to pay to us to demolish this building, that changed the business case. So that is roughly 15 euros per gross floor area. And if we don't have to spend the capex, or we don't have to spend the demolition cost, but we actually get money, that is a 5% difference in our overall budget. And 5% is not yet the world, but it is definitely a difference. And also considering the rapid increase of material cost, this number of 143,000 euros will go up. So that's one part. The other part is that we do more and more in a city. So in a city, demolitions are normally more costly and more difficult as well, because congestion, hard to get there, all kinds of regulations. So on both sides, there's probably a win-win. So what is then the impact? Because of course, a decrease of budget is always nice, but does that really move the needle? I think the fair answer to say is not as much as it will be towards the future, but it has impact. So we look mainly at two things when we do redevelopments. First of all, yield on cost. So how much do we have to invest and how much will that yield us? So how much potential rent stream will we return back? And there's a relative increase of 2 to 4%. So that is relatively limited yet, or still. On the other side, we're total return investors. So we look at the absolute net return during the value add period, which is the period from start demolition until we have completed the building and has leased it out. And it is normally a period of, let's say, 4 to 5 years. So, and there we have return hurdles. And for full developments, we have to basically get a minimum return of 10%. And that is taken into account, let's say, our leverage level. So it doesn't sound that much, but we hardly have used any leverage. So we need to make 10%. But this cost increase can already make sure that the net return goes from a 10% maybe to an 11 or 12%. And then I think the picture is already quite different. So for us, and it's also fair to say, the large part of our portfolio won't be there for demolition for the coming 20 to 30 years. But this is a concrete example where I think not only us, but also other investors or developers could really use this as also to make their business case basically work. That is the first example. The other one I want to highlight, which is maybe a little bit less tangible, but I think has more impact if we can do it right, is that we have quite a big standing portfolio where we actually spend a lot of cost upkeeping that portfolio. So we roughly spend a year around 6 to 7 million on maintenance cost. We plan to invest roughly 37 million per year on capex, but we also have service charges of around 70 million. And that service charge is, of course, energy, but it's also daily maintenance. So how could Wearthy Appraisal impact this? First of all, the maintenance. Within all our operating costs, maintenance is roughly 28% of total operating cost. But part of that maintenance cost is also because we first have to demolish something before we can build something new. So very practically, if a climate installation needs to be replaced, we first have to demolish it, take it out of the building, and then bring in something new. That is a big thing, but consider all the light bulbs which break during the year. So I don't know how many light bulbs we have in our portfolio, but I can tell you there are many, and sometimes they break. So each time a light bulb breaks, what we basically do is we screw it out, we throw it in the garbage bin, and buy a new one. So there's actually a lot of waste coming out of our buildings. Why is that relevant for us? If we can reduce that maintenance cost, that will increase basically our net operating income. So we have the same amount of rent, but we have less cost, and that results directly in higher payments to our investors in terms of dividends. And it also positively impacts our property value, because property values are based on the fact that you take your income, you deduct the cost, and then you add a multiplier to it. So it has a double effect. The same accounts for our service charges. So we charge our tenants with service charges in order to upkeep the daily, day-to-day maintenance of the building. They are cost neutral to us because we charge them to the tenants, they pay us, and it's on a net basis. So there's not really profit in between. We basically charge what we have spent. But the idea is that tenants look more and more to total cost of ownership. So they think about housing in terms of which kind of rent do I have to pay to the landlord and which all kinds of additional costs do I have. An important part there is as well the service charges. So if we could reduce that service charge, let's say by €5, could we then ask more rent? I think we could, because in the end, the tenant looks at total cost of ownership. So higher rents will also result in a higher net operating income and also will have an impact on the value. So how much would the impact be then? So let's start with the maintenance. Let's say, and this is based on our own portfolio, so it's not necessarily the truth, but at least gives you some idea on the impact. So if we could reduce maintenance costs by 10%, because we spend less cost on actually demolition, on throwing stuff away, but we could get actually some money in return. Well, if we reduce 10% of our cost on maintenance specifically, that could result potentially in a 1% increase in our total portfolio value. And then, of course, 1% doesn't sound that much, but especially in the COVID situation, any plus is very welcome at all. But 1% on 2.3 billion, that is a considerable amount of money to increase. The other one is on the service charges. So if we could say we could reduce the service charge by 5%, and we could add our rent we ask to all our tenants with the same amount, then the effect is much bigger, and it could even lead to a 7% increase in our total portfolio value. So put that 7% on 2.3 billion, and then you even talk about bigger numbers. So I would like to leave it right here. Hopefully this gives you some ideas how we see Wearthy Appraisal and how we translate it into what can we not only doing good, but can we also, is there a business case to it? I'm happy to take questions, but I think we do that at the end, Bastiaan.
All right, thank you, Ronald. I don't know if there's anybody who has a pressing question at the moment. Feel free to ask, come forward. If not, you can place it in the chat. We'll pick it up later. And with that, then I suggest we move on to our next speaker, which is CYRKL Klepek. I believe he's calling in from Vienna, actually, at the moment, where he's speaking at a conference. Welcome, CYRKL. And thank you, Ronald, once more. I really admire the thinking behind it all. It's very inspiring. And of course, when you harvest a building, as you both call it, which also in terminology is already very creative, you need a distribution channel for the used building materials, and that's where CYRKL from CYRKL Klepek could come in. So CYRKL, over to you, please.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm actually back in Prague because the Vienna conference was also switched to online version.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm happy to be here with you, and I will also start sharing my screen. So I'm CEO and founder of CYRKL.com. That's basically the biggest waste trading platform in Central Europe. Then we also do analysis of the waste management in many companies. So we have more than 1,800 companies in Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland, where we have also our branches. And basically, what we do to the companies the same thinking as our colleagues do when they're thinking about the value of the materials. So that's pretty much, and I will show you just something later on, but I always like to start with a story. And the story is pretty depressive, right? We know that out of the 100 billions of materials every year, basically 1/3 goes to landfill, goes somewhere there's not a good usage of the materials anymore. But I actually like this story. If you I'm not sure if you guys know this story about these small ducks actually floating for the past 23 years in the Atlantic oceans. So this is a very nice story. In 1992, one container on the ship from Hong Kong to I think to the USA actually was dropped in the sea, and those little ducks actually escaped from the boat, and they are told nowadays that they are floating in the Atlantic Ocean, and we can actually see them and we can measure all the things in the ocean. But what I'm actually saying is that it's probably more than 6 billions of plastic materials in the ocean. And the funny thing is that when we calculate actually the current value of this plastic, of the materials, with HDPE and so on, we get actually of the whole the plastic materials in the ocean, we actually get the bigger value than those big companies and on the right side. And that's very interesting. And what we also do that we help big manufacturing companies and also the construction companies to get the value out of the materials, because 88% actually is not connected to the final consumers, but it's connected to construction and other businesses. We do such analysis. The CYRKL basically scan when we analyze all the material flow in the many companies, and we can see that even here in Czech Republic and in this region, there is still quite a big proportion that usually goes to landfills. That's a shame, because we know that there's a value in those materials. So this is just one example of the quite a big company, international, and out of the 13,000 ton they produce every year, more than 5,000 actually goes to landfills. And there is waste to energy, and it's incineration. So the usage of materials in general is not the best. And what we aim to do in CYRKL is to change the waste management market for good. It's about finding value in the waste, right? I mean, on the left, you can imagine there's a plastic materials in the one music festival in Czech Republic, and actually on the very right is a piece of art that actually was awarded in an international affair in Brno, and I think it got like 4,000 euros for this material, for this sculpture actually made of waste. So it's really about finding value in the waste. And we do it in the CYRKL.com, as I mentioned, the biggest waste trading platform, where we used machine learning actually to match company A that has some kind of material. That are those companies are like IKEA, Skoda Auto, Skanska, Saint-Gobain, a lot of actually construction and demolition companies. I will talk more about later on. And we also do these CYRKL waste scans that we actually do in manufacturing companies. And I really like you mentioned those interesting numbers, both my pre-speakers, because I can really confirm that there's a lot of value in the waste and the materials. We can actually save from 15 to 45% of annual costs of waste. And in Czech Republic, it's from 150 to 600,000 euros per year on average in companies like Siemens, Matone, and so on. So this is something really interesting to search inside. And you probably all know the upside down revised hierarchy pyramid. So right, to avoid, reduce, recycle, recover, treat, and in the end disposal. And basically, after 2 years of really working hard on many cases, we just came up with six I would say points of success. What we do actually in those companies, And every single company save also hundreds of CO2 every year. And they always start with, you try to help them to get avoid of the waste, to minimize the waste creation. It's unbelievable, but very often the producing process, especially manufacturing companies, and you might imagine very big companies like Siemens, CYRKL, and so on. There's a lot of waste that is created during the process of creating the tools, and it's definitely something is worth looking into it. But when there is a waste, actually, it's super important to just sort it and to say like, okay, if you will just put out energy and some cost in sorting this waste, we have to calculate actually whether it's worth it, whether we can actually sell this material out. And the number 3, we aim to closed loop recycling. It's also very important because in Green Deal we see a lot of things that will be pushing companies to closing the loop. In 2025, there'll be 25% of the plastic materials, plastic packaging products that they will have to have at least 25% of recycled materials. And that will go on. We sell the generated waste and we know where it ends. I don't know how is the situation in Holland, but here in Central Europe, we have branches in Slovakia, Poland, as well now in Germany. Companies very often do not know where when the waste ends. And it's the biggest, one of the biggest eye-opener for them. Actually, companies that are focusing on circular economy quite a lot, 1/3 of their waste ends up on landfills, which is quite a shame. Fifth actually point is that we use secondary raw materials in our production. That I think is also very much connected to the plastic, also construction industry. And the final number 6, that we know the composition of our products and we know that they are recyclable. We know actually quite a big companies are now choosing, instead of Chinese manufacturing companies, are choosing the local companies that they are buying plastic materials from, because they can say like, okay, this could be recycled locally, and we know actually what is inside of materials. Before it was very often the case that they didn't know what actually is in the plastic, because the plastic, there's a lot of materials in it, and sometimes it's the reason it cannot be recycled. So there's something that's super important. So those 6 points actually are very important when closing the loop, and I'm more than happy that more than 1900 company, actually 1850 now, is in Central Europe, but also in USA and Asia are now on CYRKL, and we can circulate a lot of waste. Actually, we saved already 45,000 of CO2 this year, and the number of materials just going to be crazy. So I'm super happy that a lot of companies are thinking about their waste, how to do it differently, and there's always a way forward. We are also, because we are mostly focused on plastic, textile, metals, but also construction materials. So I think it's also very important to say a few cases of good practices here in Czech Republic or in this region. A couple of years ago, we connected Czech, quite an interesting company with Skanska. They created a Rebeton, which is very interesting material. When basically it's a technology then that they can recycle the concrete, and instead of the cement, actually they can use quite a big proportion of cement in it. So actually it could be 100% recycled materials. And now, for example, the technology, I met guys from Rebeton like a couple of weeks ago, and they told me that they now actually going to Beirut after the explosion, because there's a lot of demolition waste, and they can close the loop really in Beirut, and they can actually spend years working there. So that's something really nice, to close the loop on the place. The second thing that we had it's continuing cooperation with Skanska about the selective demolition. You guys are much bigger expert than me, so I will not go into the details, but I would like to say that actually it was very nice cooperation, because we started with selling a couple of things from inside of the building, and then we continue with a different layer of this house, and really most of the materials can be traded online. And I think it's also interesting. I'm editor-in-chief of CYRKL Czechia, the annual publishing magazine of CYRKL good examples, and this is one example we had I think last year, and it's a common modular, and I think also it's super important to see the whole construction industry from kind of also quite a bit different perspective. Basically, this company is selling modular houses, and this is a picture from Expo in Venezia in 2015, and it's basically out of the 7, I think, modules, and it was built in 2 weeks. And the CEO, a very good guy, actually, they told me that having a house of models is perfect, because when he got divorced, actually his wife took just one model, and he could take another one. So that's the story behind a Kuma modular. And that's pretty much it from my side. I'm looking for discussion, and I'm really happy that CYRKL.com, a free platform, is open for you, as well as the CYRKL waste scans. If you guys have something to discuss, you can also follow me on LinkedIn or this email. Looking for some questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cyril. I don't know if anyone has a question to any of the 3 speakers at this point. Please feel free. If not, then I have a question for you.
Yeah, or I'm happy to kick it off.
Yes, excellent, Jeanette. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to see, and I'm actually general manager of Lego, the manufacturing company here that produces for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And of course, we are also very much looking at our recycling, our CO2 footprint, and how we can do better. But as you can imagine, we are also a little bit internally focused, so it's fantastic to hear what is happening out there, and I find it very inspiring. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the technologies that you see to actually separate the waste. Like if I think of building, how do you even separate the waste? I find that difficult to visualize. And do you see changes there?
Peter, your microphone is muted, just so you know. So, see you're replying, but we can't hear you.
Yes?
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay. This is, of course, a very good question, because it's all related to the way we are have designed and built those buildings in the 70s and the 80s, which are now, let's say, approaching the end of life. So all those materials are glued with each other or whatever, or let's say in a certain way it is connected to stay for a very long while, and it's not designed for getting materials disconnected or getting them well separated. So this is a kind of an historical fact. I think we will be able to get new technologies to extract those materials or separate them with automatic machineries. But it's also again related to the way we made the buildings in the past. For instance, one of our, I mentioned the subject during my presentation, one of our main values, material value streams is concrete, because if you take a Pareto of the existing buildings, so the existing stock, then concrete is by far the #1 in mass and volume. We know that the harvested material, the harvested concrete, should be very, very clean. We cannot accept any little piece of plastic or wood inside. So it's not only that we try to do our best to get those materials mixed on the site where the building get be demolished, but we also have additional machineries in front of the upcycling machineries, where we separate with all kind of special techniques to get all the strange materials out of the concrete. This is still, let's say, one of the main challenges related to the existing buildings. But what we want to achieve, that if we are able, like with Ronald, if we are able to get awareness that there's still a value in these materials, even if they are used and designed in the 70s and 80s, then especially the new builds are getting let's say, better to dismantle. So besides the Urban Mining Collective, we also will launch later this year the Circular Design Collective, and the knowledge we collect from all our harvesting actions, we want to share with the building developers and architects of today, and make sure that the buildings which we are building today are better, let's say, to get the materials separate if they are meeting the end of life. And if the building owner recognizes the value, then he can start with this. Maybe the building will be more valuable because it is already, let's say, easier to get rid of it at the end of life. So our knowledge, we try to separate materials in advance, but we also want to make sure that the knowledge which we collect every day are used in new designs to make new buildings better. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? A question for one of the three gentlemen? Because I'm just curious, Peter. What is your current distribution channel for? You harvest buildings. You have this stock of secondhand building materials. So, what is your distribution channel? How do you sell it on, pass it on?
Well, we sell it together with the Urban Mining Collective partners. So, for instance, for wood, in Holland we have quite a lot of let's say window frames made from wood, and if they are older than 10 or 20 years, it cannot be used as a window screen anymore because the standards are changed. So but then we go one level lower, and we still recognize very valuable wood. So we have a company who's taking out those wood. He's making it in standard sizes, and we sell it to the company Stio, which is a big distributor of all kind of materials. And you will see on the web shop of Stio, they identified a lot of materials where they say, well, we have these kind of wooden standardized beams for new applications, and we have 200 on stock which are new. And we have 25 or 30 on stock which are harvested somewhere, but from a functional and, let's say, physical point of view, they are equal. So it's equal quality, and they are selling it like hybrid. And those kind of materials have a lower, we call it a lower CO2, of course. So if there are companies who want to make tendering to government buildings or something, and they can make a lower how you call it, a lower CO2 equivalent, and that gives them a little preference in the tendering process. So it's same quality, equal price, but lower carbon footprint, and that makes them more attractive in tendering processes.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's interesting. That the government support, of course, is also there with rules and regulations, but probably also with subsidies, etc. Yeah, and Cyril, question for you. I mean, your growth has been breathtaking, astonishing fast. You've been growing in the last 2 years. I think when we first met, you were only active in the Czech Republic, and that's just over a year ago. But of course, my key question is, you have quite a list of countries already, but I didn't hear the Netherlands on your list of countries. So when is your next step into the Netherlands?
It's usually spring next year, looking for the Netherlands because it's the most advanced country in Europe. I go there quite often for the week of circular economy in February, I guess. So I'll be there as well. And yeah, looking forward to go there.
Yeah, well, you've got 2 more contacts now to speak to, so
You're welcome.
That's good to hear. All right. We have a question from Andrea in the audience. Do you have any recommendations to the developers in terms of data collection for future use, especially through the BIM or similar instruments?
Yes, for sure. To identify the materials or to let's say file the right information about what kind of materials are used in buildings is key to improve that forecast, which I just mentioned. So we look to the current buildings, and that registration has never been done. So we want to we do our best to identify those materials in the building already. But if you make new buildings and you make a kind of a digital twin, which is well known, and you make a clear registration, also doing big transitions during the lifetime of the building. If you registrate the materials which are involved in the building and how they are connected to each other, then it's very valuable if you're approaching the end of life. If those materials are available, we probably can connect it to a Wearthy, to a Wearth, already early in the beginning of the lifetime of the building. So we don't have to make that investigation at the end. So very valuable, and we really support this kind of developments. The only problem is that with a lot of existing buildings which are approaching the end of life, this data is not available yet. And nobody, I think, will invest to invest in the backlog of this knowledge. So we do it at the moment the end of life moment is approached.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I think with everything, and Cyril will probably concur this. If you want to go fully circular, you have to go back to the design stage. So, and we are currently working with a stock of products that have been designed wrongly in this sense. And I think a building from the 70s, yeah, is a key example, which you are fighting with now on a daily basis. So with that, I asked Cyril actually when he's coming to the Netherlands. Peter, when is New Horizon coming to the Czech Republic? And we have, I think, also Marta from CBRE on the call. So I'm not sure if CBRE Global Investors are also active in the Czech Republic, actually. But Ronald, I see Ronald nodding. Yes, they are. So guys, when are you starting here with this fantastic, creative, and inspiring thinking and execution of it?
Well, I think we started today with awareness.
Yeah, excellent. No, then I'm really happy that we managed to get a contribution. I think Marta wants to say something because I think she has unmuted her microphone just now. So I'm curious.
Yes, I did.
Unfortunately,
my video doesn't work because I had to switch to a different notebook, and also I had difficulties to get into this call, so I missed the first 15 minutes. But I will look on the recorded version for sure. It's me and Russell Swain today. He is our head of valuation.
All right, welcome.
We are working with GI here in the Czech Republic very closely, mainly on the property management and on capital market service level.
Okay, excellent. Yes. And had you heard of New Horizon and Wearthy Appraisal before this event?
Actually, I didn't. It's quite new to me.
Okay, good. Well, so every day is a school day, and today was another one. And would it be something that would you see would be, well, let me say, immediately applicable to the Czech market and the current building stock?
I think that we are still not there, but it's a great potential for the future. Mm-hmm. And as this event is done in cooperation with the Green Building Council, where we are also the members and we are quite active there. And I know that there is recently also the initiation of BRICS, the Valuators Association, and Green Building Council, for sure. Even with the support of the developers, the future is there, and it is the future actually.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm very pleased to hear that personally. So I didn't expect otherwise, of course, honestly, from you, Marta, and CBRE here locally. All right. Then if there are any other questions or any end remarks from anybody or from any of our speakers. If not, then I would like to thank our speakers, Peter, Ronald, and Cyril. Thank you very much for your inspiring thinking and sharing your thoughts and what you're doing in daily life. It's very good learning experience. And I would like to thank participants for joining us today. And the recording will be put on our YouTube channel in a number of days. So if you want to share it with any of your colleagues or whoever who you think you've missed this, you should have seen this, you can. And if you have any questions to us of our team, don't hesitate later to get in touch. So once more, thank you all for joining us and for doing this event with us. And I wish you all a very good evening and stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.